Hey, this is Mark Justice, and welcome back to Between the Lines. You might recognize this guy, kids. Ivan Lopez is back for another episode. Ivan is a horror writer and also does horror movie reviews. So, Ivan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be back.
Good, happy to have you. Um, yeah, we're gonna have a good time, and yeah, I'm glad you're feeling better. And I, uh, for like a month, I had an upper respiratory infection that just wouldn't let go. So, I kind of get the whole coughing thing. I'm still coughing a little bit. Um, 5 weeks, and afterwards. So I get it. Just hangs on. So
Ah,
if you see me muting and then coughing, that's what I'm doing. Just like I'm going to do right now.
oh,
So, um, Ivan, I always like to start with some, broad background kinds of questions. So, who are some of your favorite writers?
oh wow. Well, some of my favorite writers are Stoker. um,
Nice.
yeah. I swear that wasn't in preparation for that question. But yeah, I mean, I really love Dracula. As a lot of people think that's kind of a hard read, but I think it's a very creative read. I like the way that it's presented.
In
I
the
like.
diary form?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic to be able to tell a cohesive story in that way.
Yeah.
Uh,
And what people don't know, I believe, if I'm correct, that it was released serialized in newspapers before it got put into a novel form.
yeah,
So it would make sense, to have these ongoing letters and to kind of drag it out because he's getting paid by the word, you know, and it just keeps people coming back for more newspapers. I mean, because it's a thick book. It's
yeah,
400 and some pages.
yeah. I mean, how brilliant of a strategy is that to release your work? And it's kind of one of those. It's a very synergistic type of publishing where the newspaper will get some revenue out of it, and so will you. Just keep working
Hmm.
each other, keep going. You just feed off of each other. That
Yeah.
symbiosis got going with that was fantastic.
Hmm.
I admire it.
When I was in college, I was taking a history class. It was medieval England, I think, history of medieval England, and I took a page from Bram Stoker, and in lieu of doing a traditional research paper, because I was just so burned out doing so many papers, I asked my professor, like, because I had a BFA in creative writing, so I was doing a creative writing tract, and I asked my professor if I could do a creative research paper. So essentially, what I did, I wanted to just research monks and monastery life, and so my paper was a series of letters from the monk to his family, all about like everyday life and chores at the monastery and the things that they did. So, it's enough for me, for the instructor to know that I did my research and I did all that, but I could put it in a way that it wasn't so rigidly structured as a research paper. So that was one of my favorite papers, to write, because it was serialized like that. It was like, 20 or so different letters, um, to his
It's
family.
amazing. I would love to read that. That's something that really grabs me. Just conceptually alone, I think is such a great idea.
Yeah. I don't know if I still have that paper. Boy, if I did it, I usually kept all my papers and stuff. It's probably in a box somewhere, but if I find it, I'll be happy to like scan it and send it to you.
Oh, that'd be
Uh,
fantastic. I'd love that.
yeah, it's somewhere stuck in a bin. It's probably gonna be like trying to find like the um oh the I'm thinking, I'm blanking out the Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the
Arc.
Lost Ark. Yeah, the Ark
Okay.
of the Covenant. It's probably going to be something like that. It's going to be stuck in a box somewhere in the back room under like piles of all kinds of other junk. But if I ever do find it, it'll be on your way.
Yeah, I mean, like, don't break your back looking for it or anything. But if you do find it,
Yeah.
I'll be happy to happy
Hmm.
to read.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Um, And my friend, Fred Wright, who I went to college with, one of his novels is called Blog Love Omega Glee, or Blog. And it is also a series of blog posts written between two people running, going back and forth at the end of the supposed end of the world during the course of a year. So these blog posts are kind of going back and forth. So that's another similar format. It's more comedic and satirical, but it's another similar format to that. It was for him. It was an easy way to write. Like I could do a blog post that I could do a few hundred words without having it really to be a structured kind of continual story. The blogs kind of tell the story as they go, you know?
Man, see, I really admire presenting content in a different way. It's great to read your run of the mill narrative, but to be able to do it in a way that make people almost question the reality. If people were reading Bram Stoker's Dracula back then, being that it was in diary entries, somebody could have thought that that was real.
Hmm.
Somebody could have been witnessing these things happening,
Yeah.
and for something to be presented to a society in that way, I think can really change the way that stories are told. You know, I love it. I love it so much.
Excellent. So, what were some of your favorite books growing up?
Well, the book that got me into, uh, I guess, into reading, let alone into horror or writing, is a Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Uh, I read that when I was really young, and it's written in a different way. It's different English because of it's a product of its time. So, um, but it still grabbed me, and I love the theme of duality in it. I love uh, uh, the undertones in it, and I love that it was able to be told in such a short in such a short span because it's not a very
Yeah,
long,
it's not. It's like a I don't even know if it's novella length.
almost. It's like
Yeah,
it's right there.
right, right. It's like a like pulp, like or yeah, novella rather, not quite a pulp even.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very very close to novella length, but it's not quite there. But I admired it because I write mostly short form, fiction. I write short stories, and the book I have out right now is a novella. So um, I write better in a short form than I do in a long, even though I'm going to try to tackle that a little bit later. But uh, that really grabbed me. It really inspired me to write the way that I do now. Uh,
how did it inspire you? Was it the as far as the structure, the form? Robert Louis Stevenson, he wrote multiple different genres. I mean, I don't know, did he write any other horror than
I'm
that?
trying to
I mean, he
think.
did a lot of adventure.
He did lots of adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was more of his bread and butter was
Hmm.
adventure.
Like
So
Rudyard Kipling wrote all kinds of stories of India and all this adventure, back when these places were still considered exotic,
mhm,
Edgar Rice Burroughs, you know, writing about Tarzan and, you know, to the early 20th century sensibilities, these were other worlds, you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, so I think the what really inspired me about this book was I wasn't exposed to a lot of like horror um, before then. Like I mean, there were some movies and such, but not to the point of sci-fi horror, I guess. And this was my real introduction to the the marrying of different genres in one work. To the extent that this book does, because you're always going to have some crossover in your story, but for two themes to be for two genres to be so parallel to each other. You know, you have your science fiction, you have your horror, you know they're there and they're working together. You know, it's not a
Right.
horror film, a little bit of romance, a little bit of science fiction, that's side stories. Like, no, these two things are here. These are the themes. Um, I
It's
really love that.
it's similar to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in
Yes,
that regard. You
yes,
know, it's science fiction, it's science fantasy, it's horror. You know, it's all those things.
it's everything
Um,
you want.
yeah, and what a great moral lesson. You know, this idea of hubris, and it's like it's Greek tragedy at its core.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes,
you here's this hero who has an amazing ability and thinks himself to be equal to the gods, or in this case, now I know what it got, feels like to be God. And everything falls on down, and just the gods like, guess no, we're not gonna let that happen.
right.
Yeah, it is certainly tragic in that kind of scope of things.
Yeah, the universe will always remind you that you are human. Yeah,
Yes.
it will. You will never be godlike. Don't try it.
Hmm.
And I love those types of stories. And those stories, they're old. You know, it's not a new theme. So for stories like Frankenstein or Jekyll and Hyde, it is a retelling of that theme, but doing it in a different way. You know, as I grew and read the book more and more, I started to admire that part of the book more. You know, where it's like this is a really great retelling of a theme that we've heard over and over and over again. I just really love this type of retelling. You know, a specific one.
Hmm. I read somewhere, I don't know if it's true or not, but it sounds like it is, that when Robert Louis Stevenson's wife read his original draft, she was so terrified she threw it, like horrified by it, she threw it in the
I
fireplace. And
heard that.
yeah, and so he had to write it again. Um, so I gotta wonder how much of that draft changed. With any significant rewriting revision, change comes. But I just thought, oh man, I wonder what was in that first draft. Um,
Me too. I kind of wonder, is this new draft less terrifying because did he rewrite it so that his wife can read it?
right. Yeah, we have to gauge the sensibilities of the Victorian audience that he's writing for. And it's like when you read Nathaniel Hawthorne, I still think his horror is still effective,
Mm-hmm.
because it really is good at evoking the paranoia of that kind of Puritan paranoia that was around in New England, and just kind of that religious fervor and demons and lurking, everywhere. And so no, I totally like that. I totally get that. Not imagine the macabre. People always love horror stories. Have been around, you know, for a long time. We love horror. We love being scared and frightened in a way that's safe. You know, um, because ultimately horror is rather, kind of conservative in a way where it kind of reinforces some of the things about the world. We leave a horror film, we get scared, we leave, and we realize my life could be worse. Could be like that person who's been stalked by this supernatural monster.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and
we love to learn that way. We love to learn things, you know.
yeah.
And I think what's great about the horror genre that gives it uh, it's so deserving of respect that society doesn't give it because those were words, and I swear to God that those words were supposed to make sense. I just read them back in my mind like those words didn't make any sense. Horror deserves respect that society doesn't give it, and it's because it's so cautionary in its stories,
Hmm.
and you don't pay attention to it because most of the time it's shrouded in blood and guts. you know,
Right.
uh, it's shrouded in terror. You know, and people tend to not get past being scared. But later on, when they think back on it, they're like, "Oh, it was about this," you
Hmm.
know. And I think that more people need to pay attention to those types of things. Science fiction does it very well, and science fiction does it in a less obvious way.
Yeah,
And I think that's why it garners a little bit more respect than horror. Horror is a lot more subtle with it, you know.
I think for a while they were interchangeable. I mean, especially in the 50s when we think about like the giant bug movies that we had all over, the states, and but you still have stellar examples of science fiction, like The Thing from Another World, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Forbidden Planet. These are just magical films, and they really appeal to smart writing and smart storytelling, borrowing on other sources. I mean, from The Tempest to these classic themes, and then also representing what was going on at the time, the culture, the zeitgeist in the 50s is outer space craze, and realizing, wow, it's also a really damning commentary about the world becoming a nuclear capable entity. A very early anti-war science fiction film. And but I think because science fiction is rational at its root, it appeals to the rational side of us, whereas horror appeals to the nightmare, the irrational. I think that's what a main difference is. And uh, I think really good horror can yeah, has to be watched and it can be appreciated. This is kind of leading into what I was wanting to ask you about, because I know other than writing horror stories, you also do horror movie reviews.
Hmm.
And I wanted to ask you, like, what makes a good horror story to you?
Oh man, wow. That's I don't think somebody anyone's asked me that. So I think that no matter how you present it, I think to it needs to tell you something, and it's not just a display of gore. It's not just shock value. For it's an hour and a half of shock. If that's what you're going for, fine. But I mean, personally, that doesn't get me.
I lost your audio. I lost your audio, buddy. Can you hear me?
Uh,
Oh, you're back on.
oh, here we go.
Okay. I can edit that little
All right,
snafu
fine.
out. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, but to me, the story does need to tell me something. There are a lot of horror flicks out there that are strictly for the gore, and even though there is a story, it doesn't shine through. I feel that content needs to complement your story, not overpower it. So when I'm watching a movie, that's one of the biggest things that I'm looking for. Is even though I can see the artistry in your content, because there is a lot of artistry in gore effects and visual effects for horror movies, and I respect that very much. And I'm not saying that it should take a backseat to anything, but balance is key. You know,
Yeah,
balance
some really effective horror films are almost bloodless. Like
exactly.
the first Halloween has
No blood.
almost no blood in the beginning, the stabbing scene with the sister.
Right.
But pretty much after that, it's bloodless. It's more about the suspense and the building, the ratcheting up of terror.
Exactly. People
Yeah,
aren't always just afraid of blood.
yeah.
You know, people. There are so many other things that people are afraid of. Tap into those things.
Hmm.
It builds suspense. A horror movie, an effective horror movie, will haunt you more than it will scare you. It'll follow you home, and
Yes.
that's what I like.
Yeah. What's the most terrifying movie you've ever seen? What's your scariest movie? The one that just scares the shit out of you every time you watch it.
I've watched The Exorcist once and never did again. And here's the thing: I'm not a religious person, so it has nothing to do with the religious undertones or overtones. Has nothing to do with the religious themes. It has everything to do with the undertones, the metaphor of losing control of yourself, losing control of a situation, and or what's supposed to be in your control is in the control of somebody else, and uh, what those types of things can do to you and your life, and that can absolutely destroy it. That concept is terrifying. Uh, the presentation is terrifying.
Yes. Did you see the original version or have you seen the director's cut?
I saw the original,
Okay.
um, and I tried to watch the director's cut, but I was still kind of like, nah.
Yeah, there's most of it is padding with like when Reagan is getting when she's in the hospital and getting tests. But there's one scene that you really have to see.
Am I gonna have to watch this again?
It's just there's one scene that has what they call a double climax.
Okay.
And it's the scene that they added that when I saw it, I'm like, oh, I'm like, oh, it, my skin's crawling now because, like you, The Exorcist is the most terrifying movie to me. I will not watch it alone at night. No way in hell. And I grew up in a religious home, so that was even part of it. Was thinking, my God, all this kid did was like play with this Ouija board, and the Satan's possessed her. What the hell's going to happen to me? I was worried about my bed flopping around, like like oh my God, I can't. There's no control over this. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Exorcist is
there's
great.
nothing you can do about what's going on around you, and that is just an awful thought. But for you, I will watch the director's cut.
Yeah, even if you want to fast forward into it,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, fast forward. I'll have to kind of let you know where it's at, so you don't have to watch all of it. But it's certainly after Reagan is possessed. Yeah, it's
I'll do it for you.
okay. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, even if you just want to watch that scene, because that's the most that when it happens, it's like oh God, it's just horrifying.
I watched it as a teenager, so now I'm kind of wondering, can I handle it now?
Right. I was
You know?
12 when I watched
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So yeah, so you get it. It's like, and
Hmm.
maybe now I can handle it. Who
I would
knows?
watch it in the morning, first thing on the morning, so you have all day to decompress
Mm-hmm.
and like watch cartoons and things that are making happy thoughts. Because I swear to God, that night, if you have to walk anywhere far to get to the bathroom, you're going to be thinking she's in there waiting for you. You
Oh,
know?
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I still don't. I mean, I still like at 3 in the morning. I wake up. I'm like, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom. And I'll walk to the bathroom. Like, it flashes in my mind like something's gonna jump out at me. It just never fails, man. I just watch too much horror. Um.
Oh,
So, um, other than The Exorcist, what are some of your favorite horror films that you enjoy watching?
so I will start with my all-time favorite horror film, which actually goes back to what we were talking about with sci-fi and horror being really well together. Alien is a perfect movie to me, absolutely perfect, uh, and or at least as perfect as a movie can get. No movie is without its flaws, but I think this is as close to perfection as it's going to get.
It's amazing.
It is absolutely amazing,
Yeah.
and I think this is one of those examples of uh, symbolism in horror being very effective. And this movie also, outside of the chest burster scene, didn't spill a lot of blood.
Right.
You know, the chest burster scene was the bloodiest scene in it, unless you count Ash malfunctioning. But
Yeah.
his blood is white, so usually you can kind of like go either way with that. But
Right.
in terms of like human blood being spilled, there's a little bit after that, but there really isn't a lot.
Quick flashes of the tongue coming out,
Exactly.
lashing out. But it's very, very minimal. Right.
Very
That
minimal.
that
It
movie is all about the psychological terror going on. It's a
yeah,
haunted house in space. That's how I
yes.
describe it to people who've never seen it.
And
Yes.
it has a principle that I really love, and that is what you don't see is what scares you. I love fear of the unknown in horror movies. I love leaving a if two people uh, could watch a movie and talk about it later and have two completely different perspectives of what may have happened during the things you didn't see, but they're both equally terrified. You did well. You did
Yeah.
very, you know,
Right.
because everybody's afraid of different things. What you're afraid of is not what I'm afraid of. But if we can present a story, present a movie, a book, what have you, in a way that can terrify both of us and tap into the individual things that make us uneasy without having to tell two different stories. I mean, how brilliant is that?
Yeah. Because it starts off as a standard science fiction film. Deep space, the technology, it's all like grounded in reality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, and then it just takes off on this like spooky ghost story in a way,
Yeah.
haunted house.
It was like what you were saying earlier, where science fiction is rooted in logic. So science fiction, so Alien at its core is logical. Everything about it is, even down to the xenomorph itself and how it operates and what it's wanted by the Wayland Company for. But we get into the horror, into the I don't want to say illogical, but the fantastical
Hmm.
once the chest burster comes.
Right.
Not even when the face hugger comes. You're still just kind of like you're still kind of in the science fiction realm when the face hugger comes.
Right. Because we don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Exactly. The second that thing bursts out of John Hurt's chest, you don't know. You don't even know what to believe anymore.
Yeah. It becomes survival horror.
Yeah.
All those survival horror games, it started with Alien. Um, yes. No, I totally agree. So, last question about horror movies before we get back into your writing. Are there any recent horror movies or TV shows that stand out to you as like must watch?
So, and this is not to promote me, but Mad God by Phil Tippett was just he just released a whole stop motion um, feature length film on Shutter. I think it's on AMC Plus as well, but it's called Mad God, and holy shit,
I've heard good things about it. Yeah.
it is beautiful. It is beautiful. It is macabre. It is terrifying. It is poignant. It is so much that you would want in a horror flick, and it's one of those things where it's dystopian, so you have a little bit of a science fiction aspect to it. Well, a big science fiction undertone to it, and you have a lot of horror imagery. The horror mostly comes in the imagery to kind of reinforce the horrors of a dystopian future. It is, oh my god,
Okay, excellent. Yeah,
it
it's
is
on the list. I know the guys at one of the other podcasts I do, Unsane Radio. That's on our list. We're going to watch it. We're going to do an episode about it. So,
I'd love
um,
to hear your thoughts. I'd love to know what you think about
yeah,
it.
yeah. I'll let you know when the episode comes out because we're all like chomping at the bits. Like, okay, yeah, we got to see this movie. Yeah, and like I think another good example of horror science fiction is Event Horizon.
I love that movie.
Yeah, and it's like
Hellraiser.
Hellraiser in space. Right? It's very much like a when you think of Clive Barker, it's a very Clive Barker esque kind of movie. As
Yeah,
far as the themes that he writes with, and it's fantastic. Yeah,
I watch that movie at least once or twice a year.
yeah.
I have to. That and Hellraiser. I love. Barker is such a revolutionary mind.
Mhm.
You
I like
know.
his short fiction way better than his novel, long fiction. Something changes. I think when he gets, well, there's a different. They're just different monsters. A short story, you just hit the ground running. You don't have to worry about developing everything. You're just like you're there, you're in. You just go tell the story and you get out.
Hmm.
Unlike a novel where you things have to develop, you got meta themes and all these other kind of things that you're working with. It's a completely different experience. So like his books of blood, you know, are very fun, but like Weave World, just
Yeah,
they're just different animals.
but that's what I
Um,
love about writing short stories. I
mhm.
love writing short stories because I don't need to flesh out too much
Yes,
of anything really.
right. We don't need foreplay. We're going right to the intercourse. You know,
Absolutely. Yep, you
right?
are in it, man.
Yeah. Don't kiss me, man. I want to stick it in and go.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. These are little one night stands in a nice little collection there. Yeah,
right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not even gonna spend the night. We're just gonna wham bam. Thank you, ma'am.
yeah.
No, no. I get it. I I tampered with some short stories when I was in college. Um, I did some horror short stories, and I have like three or four afterwards that I had written, and I started working on a science fiction story. I just never finished. I have an outline for it. I need to go back and rewrite it, but I, I, I don't know. I've kind of gotten into the thing where I'm writing longer works now. That started when I started writing my movies, and right now I think the stories I want to tell are just longer, and that's okay. I mean, in 5 years, maybe I want to write a bunch of short stories. Yeah, I don't know. Although, one thing I didn't think about, I do have a series that I haven't really done much with, but it's a series of short stories that are all connected. Um, it's kind of 1880s, so in a very superstitious town in Massachusetts, and it's kind of this supernatural. I won't say Lovecraftian, but it's definitely supernatural. But all the stories are individual. You can read them individually, but when you read them overall, they definitely have an ongoing. There's a continuity that ties everything together, kind of builds toward a logical end. So, I guess I need to dust off my short story writing chops and get back to it. But
There you go.
let's get back to you. Other than horror, are there any other genres that you would like to write?
Oh wow! I mean, I really want to write science fiction without the horror aspect. Uh, I need some practice on that though. I'm so used to the horror themes. I'm probably going to, if I start writing science fiction, I can see myself slipping into the horror territory, making a really dark science fiction. Um, but going into that, I mean, like dark fantasy and stuff. I mean, like I kind of it's almost like horror is my ball and chain, you know, and I want to go to other genres, but I'm still rooted in this. That ball and chain's always going to be there. Like it's reminding me it's always there, and so that's always going to be a part of what I'm doing.
Sure.
So there's going to be some darkness in my ventures into other genres,
Yeah.
but I really love to try to do science fiction, and a little bit of fantasy.
No, I get that. Right. I think I'm similar in that because that's my natural inclination. Well, I often do. My movies are all comedies, but and my even though my first novel series, it's a cozy mystery. Um, when those four books are done, I'm doing a horror novel set in the same town with all the same characters because I've never seen that happen before. I mean, Stephen King has all these interconnected stories that take place in the same world that are all horror, but I've never seen someone take a setting and characters from one genre and completely turn it on its head and do something completely opposite, you know?
I love that.
Oh, I mean, I'm interested. Thank you. I appreciate that. It was like when I got the idea for it, like, oh my God, I'm going to kill the whole fucking town. Yes. Uh, I began writing down all the characters' deaths. I'm like, I gotta kill more people. So in like books 2, 3, and 4, I'm adding about 15 new characters in each book so that I have more people to kill off. in the horror novel, you know.
Oh man! So every time I get to a part of the book where we're seeing a lot of people being introduced, we're like, "Oh, those fuckers are gonna die."
Well, I
It's
mean, I
just,
can't. Everyone's dying. I mean, it's like it's gonna be like Roanoke, you know,
yeah.
like the whole town. Um,
Oh
yeah,
man, that's so
yeah, I know,
cool.
I know. I'm so excited. I wrote the end already, and
That's where it always begins, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, and I it was like a gut punch. I'm like, oh, I felt like I did when I watched the end of the movie version of The Mist,
Ooh,
you know, and I'm like, it just kind of took the wind out of me. I'm like, oh man. So, and I was like, oh, it was an emotional thing to write. There was a part of me that was feeling, oh my God, I could empathize with the reader's emotions, especially if they dared read the cozy and fall in love with these characters and then watch me just mercilessly kill them all. But then as a writer, there was a great joy, like, oh God, this is so, you know, I could tell like, oh, this is good. This is going to be so powerful. You just know, you
yeah.
know, that when you,
Oh man.
so yeah, I'm most excited about that. I'm really jazzed. So I got to get these books out so I can write the horror book. So,
It's a great thing to go into things like that where you get to build a universe like that. Because I'm doing the same thing right now with the short story collection that I'm currently writing.
yeah, I saw that on your website, and that's good. I'm glad that you want to talk about that because that was my next question is about world
Okay.
building, which typically doesn't like, often happen in short stories. But since you have this collection that are all taking place in this kind of same this county, this world, I wanted to ask, how do you design your world?
So it actually comes from just places that I've seen around where I live, and I took a lot of the landscapes that I've seen. I live in Central Florida, so there's a few different types of landscapes. Some are farmland, some are marsh, a little swampy. I live in Orlando, so there's the city as well. So you have a few different things to to take from, and I was like, well, what if I take these things that are so familiar to me and build my own landscape, my own little place in a way that I kind of want it to be laid out. I get to be a city planner now and just kind of play civil engineer with this with this plot of land that I've made for myself. What happens to the people in this place? Uh, are the people connected, or are they not? Do they know each other? In these stories, some of them they don't really interact with each other within the stories, but you can tell how they're connected via where they are in the county. So they all live in that same place. Uh, some of them will cross paths soon in another work that I have brainstorming right now because I want all these characters to come together in a novel trilogy. So this is going to be like my horror fantasy, like huge thing where all of these characters from this volume and another volume of short stories that are all connected, they're going to converge in this novel trilogy, and we're going to see a world that explains where all of these monsters come from.
Nice, I like
Uh,
that. It's like the
and
Avengers,
yeah,
Avengers
and
with monsters,
Avengers with
right?
monsters.
Right.
Like there's this place that is parallel to our world where the monsters live and come from, and there's a portal that these monsters use to come into our world for XYZ reasons. And we get to see that world, and we get to see what they want with us, and why these people in these other short stories are having these experiences.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
so that's all going to come together down the pipe, and I'm really really excited to write this, to write all of this.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the feel of this current work in progress, it's called the Meadow County Chronicles Volume One. Um, I was really inspired by the Martian Chronicles, the Ray Bradbury,
Mm-hmm.
where
Excellent.
he kind of did the same thing, where he had a lot of short stories that were all connected because he was forced to um, he tried to do a short story collection, but the publishers wanted him to write a novel. So he wrote a novel that was where the chapters were kind of like individual stories, but they were all connected. He just connected his short stories and like, oh, here it is. Here's the novel.
Right. It's all about Mars. So there
It's
you
all about
go.
Mars, you know. And
Yeah.
there you go. All the aliens look the same. All the Martians look the same. So that's all the same universe. So this counts as a novel, right? And it worked. So
Right.
I've been kind of doing a little bit of that same thing where they're all connected via where they are. Um, but this is more, this is cut and dry a short story collection. It's not the I'm trying to pass it off as a novel as Bradbury did.
Nice. So, what aspect of your world do you like the most? The world that you're creating. What there's something about it that particularly like makes you really excited. Like, yeah, this is great.
Oof. There is the story that I'm working on right now, which is the last story in the collection. So I'm almost done. Um, it's called Shadow Glen, and it is about witches. Um, well, it's about a witch and a warlock, and this is my favorite story in this series. And it pulls its scenery uh, from some rural parts of Orange County, Florida, kind of like going into Seminole County and like Kissimmee and all that and all that. There's some more rural parts over there that is uh, I love it because it's not typical Florida, I guess. It's not all marsh and swamp and Disney World and
Okay.
and all of that. It is mostly like farmland with a lot of pines instead of a lot of palms. Uh,
Right. You don't really think of farmland being prevalent in Florida.
you don't, but
Yeah.
fun fact: there was a lot of cattle farming in Florida back in hundreds of years ago.
Hmm.
There still is cattle farming out here, and there are a lot of pine forests. There are two like different like specific types of pines. I guess this is the my favorite part of my favorite aspect of all of this because I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to um, nature and environment because I'm a little bit of an environmentalist at heart, and so I really love like botany and zoology and all that. I'm very specific in these stories to species of plants to show you how much of a nerd I am about
No,
that.
that's great.
There are two specific types of pines that are very prevalent in Florida, especially in Central Florida, and I use those a lot in describing the scenery. So my favorite aspect about this is building the scenery itself and putting you in that scenery. The story is there. The story obviously is there. The characters obviously are there. But I like to paint the picture of where you are so that you can be in that. It's not just this person sat next to a tree. It's that person sat next to a southern live oak that with Spanish moss hanging over its tentacle like branches. You know, I want you to see that specific tree because I think that's so important to the immersion of the story.
Right.
Especially I know that information. Why wouldn't I do that? And maybe just nerd out a little bit. That's for me. You know.
Yeah. The God is in the details, or the good is in the details, as the saying goes. Right.
Yeah.
No, no, that's good. Um, well, once you have a world, you have to put characters into it. So let's talk a little bit about your character creation process. How do you go about creating and developing your characters?
A lot of my characters are based on people I know, uh, and I've taken elements of people's personalities, and I like to play with those because I don't like to just take a few personality traits from a list and just shove them into a character, because they may or may not work well with each other, and if a person is like an introvert but somehow gregarious at the same time. That's not it clashes. So I'm not just randomly throwing things into a character. If I meet somebody or if I know somebody who has like certain personality traits that I think are interesting together, I want to see more of that. I want to put that into a character and show the world how interesting of a person these personality traits can make. Um, excuse me for a second. I'm going to cough real quick.
Sure.
Right. So and in doing that, I make the character more believable because they're based on real people.
Right.
So these are people that you can actually meet. Uh, you've probably met a person like this, you
Yeah.
know. So I love to put those types of things in my characters so that you can connect with them a lot easier.
Excellent. So, which of your characters would you most like to have a drink with?
Ooh, uh, I would I would probably say um, Noel Williams, which is the main character in Shadow Glen in that story that I'm writing right now, and she is a green witch, so she's very in touch with nature. She is somewhat of an environmentalist, so we have that in common. And honestly, she can probably make a killer cup of tea or a killer cup of coffee. I mean, she already knows how. You know, she knows every botanical element there is to know, and why it. She can probably tailor a hot beverage to me. You know, she knows she's that connected to things, and she is a very curious person. She is very headstrong, and she will not stop until she like finds answers to questions. So I
Nice.
think that a conversation with her would be nothing short of fascinating.
Well, my follow-up question is what would be the first question you would ask?
What do the trees tell you?
What do you expect her answer to be to that?
I expect her to have a very long answer, but long story short, um, in a word, everything. The trees are everywhere. The trees feed the air, and the air goes everywhere. So the trees tell her everything. There is not one tree that doesn't know anything.
Yeah, and they're all connected underneath the ground, right? With the what's it called, the bioderm or something. Is that what it's called? They're connected with the trees and also like all of the fungi. There's like this neural network under the ground where the trees can communicate and to
Mm-hmm.
one another, like across the planet,
Yep.
or throughout the continent. Like they just can talk to one another, like, which
Yeah.
I find just amazing and fascinating, and how simply connected they are to one another, and how we've just taken them for granted in a way that we just never appreciated this, and we've really just you know just treated our planet like it was our own personal toilet.
I know.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Oh, well, that's fascinating. um let's talk about your creativity a little bit. So, if you can talk about what is your creative process?
Chaotic. Uh, I mean, in a word, um, I'm I am the type of person that does not plan very well. At least when it comes to writing, uh, I write down everything that comes to my mind as it comes to my mind. So little bits here and there. Sometimes I will form a story around a quote. I just I said something to myself that was like, that sounds pretty cool. I'm gonna write that one little thing down, and I was like, I'm gonna make a character say that. In what story? I have no damn idea, but I'm gonna write a story around it, maybe, and then I just try to. So I mean, I guess it's like one of those things where something comes to my mind and I try to challenge myself to write something around it. It that happens more often than not, but I don't outline when I write. I've tried to, so it's not for a lack of trying. I know that it's one of the things that you probably should do, but every time that I've tried, I have failed. So I guess I just have to find a way to outline that fits me, but I just haven't found it yet. So most of my stories, at least on my rough drafts, are a bit of a stream of consciousness, and can be kind of a mess. I'm sure my editor can attest to that. But yeah, I mean, my creative process is just kind of all over the place, and it seems like it's something that doesn't make any sense, but it does to me.
Yeah. I'm all there with you about like getting an idea and then definitely, when you have a good quote that you're going to put in the story, some of my movies that start off always that way. I always start with the jokes, like for Quest for Uranus, the first line I wrote was, I bet Uranus is a dark and mysterious place. And just like anytime you're going to use the word Uranus, there's a joke. But
Oh yeah,
um, yeah, I totally get that. Like usually the first thing that comes with a story is something the character is going to say. I'm like, okay, because that tells me immediately who this character is and motivation, just outlook on things. I mean, a million things can be told by just a couple lines for me, and when I internalize a character. So I totally get that. Yeah, that was like my next question was, are you a pantser or a plotter? And since it sounds like you're definitely a pantser, um, I'm a plotter, the opposite end. I can't pants. Even my short stories. I used to write short stories without any outline, but now even my short stories have outlines. So I have to plan ahead of time to know where I'm going to do, where I'm going to go. I mean, it's all my years in academia. I just have to think that way. But
yeah, I can't do that.
I get it. And that's one thing I love about doing this show is that all of us as writers, we all start with an idea kind of back here, and we all end up with a finished product up here. But how we get there, it's just wildly different.
Yeah,
I know people I've interviewed and talked with people who've like pants complete novels, and they're like they're in their current work of progress. It's not finished. They go, I can't wait to write it because I don't know how it ends yet. I'm like, and I'm thinking, how could you not? My plotter brain is just having fits. But when I hear that my current work in progress is like a 23-page outline, they're like, oh my god, that freaks them out. So you know, I
I get
I,
it.
I totally get that. That's what I love about this. It's just we're all so creatively different, but we accomplish similar things.
Yeah. So do you because you're a plotter, do you also can you write non-linearly, or do you typically go linearly when you're writing?
Like beginning to end.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, beginning to end. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Me too.
yeah.
Which is that's one of the other weird things. Was like you would think that the chaotic mind, you would be going like scene here, scene here, and just be bouncing around, right?
But that's my bouncing around comes in the idea generation phase.
Hmm.
And when I'm just brainstorming and coming up with ideas, I have a notebook that I keep with me. I just write everything down. And when it gets to be enough of ideas that where it starts forming a story, then I start organizing them and kind of chunking them like, okay, I think this would be the good story. I definitely want these elements. And then I start trying to fill in the blanks and like, okay, now if I'm writing whatever story, if I'm writing like my cozy mystery, I'm like, okay, I have to have what's the mystery? What are the clues? What builds up to it? What are the red herrings? Characters, I got to throw them in there. Who am I developing? Then I have to consider the overarching main character has a 4-book character arc where she's going through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so the first book she's at the bottom, and now she's in the beyond that. Her basic needs have been met, but now she's in this liminal kind of weird phase where it's about connection to people, and it's awkward and it's muddy. And so hopefully by the end of book 4, she'll be self-actualized. Hopefully, we'll see. But so that those things all have to be kind of in order so that I know when I'm writing that I have to be cognizant of all the things that I'm developing. So I even color code my outlines. So if I'm working on character development, it's one color. If I'm working on the mystery part, it's one color. If I'm working on the cozy part or whatever, so that I know what to focus on.
Oh man, I really admire your process. I wish I can be that organized. Meanwhile, I'm going for like a week without writing, but I'm reciting the last sentence that I wrote so that I know what I'm gonna write next. And just like
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to me, then I'll just go ahead and do it. You know, uh,
Yeah.
it, I wish I can be as organized as you, but I know that's just not going to happen. So I better get used to it.
Right. And it still doesn't change the fact that even though I know what's going to happen, it doesn't. I still have to get from sentence 1 to sentence 2 to sentence 3, sentence 4. I still have to build the story a sentence at a time, a word at a time, just like with pantsers. It just I know where I'm going, and they just have an idea, but I know exactly where I'm going. And for me, that allows me to kind of more readily and easily foreshadow things, leave breadcrumbs as I go,
Mm-hmm.
and focus on things, knowing that I have a clear path. I can take time to kind of focus on like a character more here, or develop a side story that just a lovely little story, has nothing to really do with, like I say, the main plot, but it's something that adds to the coziness of the book. Or if that's where I'm working on the mystery, because that's what I'm writing now. So but having that outline allows me the freedom to kind of do that. But I still have to get from point A to point B to point C a sentence at a time. And that's for me where the discovery happens. It's intention, invention, imagination, and discovery all kind of happen at times. And that's those moments are still throughout, because you still have to write, 100, words, you know. 20 pages is nothing
Yeah,
compared to 400, you know?
right. Man, it's just it is beautiful how much we differ for the same outcome.
Right.
Our journeys are so different, but
Exactly.
our goals to be the same, and I think that's just there's just nothing that isn't fascinating about that.
Yeah, right. It's and I think the people who watch the show who aren't writers, I think it's one thing they really enjoy hearing this stuff, creative process, because I don't know, the misconception about writing and just people sitting down and but all the work that goes into writing, there's so much that goes into it way beyond what you see. And that I just find that creative process so fascinating. Everyone is so different, and I think it's great. So um, let's talk a little bit about writing process. What part of the writing process do you like the most?
The start of it, and it's because I really love opening a story because I have now opened the door to a brand new, just a brand new everything, brand new world, brand new people. I am now meeting people. I love introducing people because it's like, here's my friend world. Get to know this person, and I really love that. There's so much possibility once you start writing the first paragraph, you know, and just the first line. I was like, oh man, now we're gonna hit the ground running, and because of the chaos that I've already uh, described, now I'm also kind of like, well, where the hell am I going? This is gonna be great. I'm running into the woods without a map. This is fantastic. Uh, so just that whole uh, that unknown that I'm walking into, I think is so exciting. I think about the Hobbit going, I'm going on an adventure.
Hmm.
It's exactly what it is every time I just start a new story, and that's my favorite.
Yeah. what part of the writing process do you like the least?
The editing. Uh, and I know that's such a cliche thing to say, but I sifting through my own chaos is daunting. I can't even imagine how it is for my editor, and I appreciate her so much for having to read my rough drafts. But I'm a pretty harsh critic on myself, so having to go back and fix parts of my stories. It's one of those things where I have to really learn to be honest with myself, and not only from the perspective of know what doesn't work, but from the perspective of know what does, know what works. Because being your own worst critic can also allow you to um, take out things that work. That just because you didn't like it doesn't mean that your audience won't. You know,
Mm.
they might love something that you think sounds cheesy or sounds stupid or nonsensical or whatever. Somebody's gonna get it. So learning to be lenient with myself is is something that I've been trying to learn as I edit things on my own before I send it out to my editor. Um, and I think that's the reason why it's my least favorite part, because it is the most self-reflective part of the process. And sometimes I just don't want to look at myself and try to either be like, man, that sucked, or or you're better than that. It's those conversations with myself that I don't really want to have sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, and there's something to the emotional exhaustion that comes after finishing a draft.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's always good to let it sit for a while before you go back and start editing, you know, because you have to look at it with cold, dispassionate eyes. Like when I stopped writing my draft because a while ago, just almost halfway in, I knew it wasn't working. I had been writing because they always say, you got to keep on writing. But like the last 4 or 5 days I had written, it was just garbage. And I knew, I'm like, why am I just adding more garbage to the pile? And there was a character I realized when I wrote her in the first book, I wanted to bring her more into the second book. I realized I don't know anything about her other than what she looks like and what she does. I don't know her personality. I don't know anything. And just trying to like figure that out, getting a handle on those things. I figure I can't continue writing this book until I get a handle on this. But you have to be able to look at those things and look at say, okay, I've kind of built this kind of a blobby structure. It's a form, it's a shape. Now what can I do to make it better? And sometimes it takes longer to rewrite and revise than it does writing the draft because you're much more meticulous and careful and like eyeing everything and all the details, like, okay, questioning everything, like how can I make this better? And that's an exhaustive process.
It really is. Yeah, I
Yeah.
I, I get you there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's necessary though.
Oh yeah, you have to. Right.
We have,
And
have to do it.
yeah, I don't have an editor per se, but I'm lucky that I have about 8 people who are my beta readers, and they're also writers, and some are just fans, and who are good at different aspects of looking at the draft. Some are really good at like looking at the story and organization and character development, and others are really good at like spotting typos that I've missed or something. So I rely on, and a couple are just avid readers, so I just rely on their input because and they've got no reason to flatter me. So it's just, I told them, I understand there are things that need to be fixed. I want to make sure this is the best thing possible. So just give it to me. What is working and what isn't working. And, it's important to rely. You got to have other people outside of yourself so you don't get so myopic and looking at your work, because it's just too easy to get lost in that.
Yeah, you get lost in yourself very, very easily. I love
Yeah.
having outside eyes on it because they're going to be the people that really set your perspective straight.
Sure.
You
Oh, of
know,
course.
the ones that you have to trust those people, and when you have the right people looking in on it, you know your story is going to come out its strongest.
Yeah.
So you can't. It's very easy to get lost in yourself when you're looking back on your work.
Yeah. No, I agree. So when did you first come to realize what your writer voice was?
Oh man, it was fairly recently. It was when I decided to write "In Town Beyond the Trees" as a book. Because fun fact, it was actually a screenplay when it was first written. Um, I wanted to uh, shoot I wanted to shoot this as a film, and it sat it sat away for years, and nothing ever happened with it. And I dug it out one day, and I read it over, and I'm like, you know what? As an venturing into indie filmmaking with this is going to be a feat. There's a lot of elements in this that are just not that I that are going to be expensive. There's going to be like late nights with this, possibly overnights because it's mostly taking place at night. Even if we shot, even if we shot day for night, it may not even work very well. I have an entertainment background, by the way, so this is one of the reasons why I thought I can do this. But so much of it was just not going to work out as an indie film, a very low budget type of thing. So I was like, well, what if I went the literary route with this? What if I rewrote this as if I adapted this into a book? Um, I would only be really relying on myself to get it finished. I'm not relying on other people to be there to help me with this vision. Um, I have a little more control over what happens with this. I can beef it up a little bit. Let's do that. Get a little bit more detail and all that. So let's do that. So as I started doing that, I'm like, holy crap, this is what I should be doing. This is how I should be telling my stories. I need to leave the um, not not so much the dream of being a filmmaker, but the desire to be a filmmaker. I think I need to trade that in being an author. It was so much more fulfilling to write it in this form than to try to tell it from a visual format. And that's a thing right then is when I found my voice and found that this is who I am. This is what I need to be doing.
As someone who's made three no budget indie movies, I completely understand where you're coming from. The logistical nightmare of getting 15 people together to do something, uh, you know, and it's maddening. So like Monster Party Beach was my first movie. That took a couple of years to shoot. Quest for Uranus was a year. Fortunately, the cost wasn't bad. It was like $135 for Quest for Uranus. That included buying a green screen. Um, yeah, I know, it's awesome, right? And but it was a year of work from writing, shooting, casting, directing, editing. Editing alone took over 300 hours. So I would edit and start my timeline from the very first day. I started like putting pieces in place in a rough outline because I knew I had the script. I knew where they're going to go because otherwise it would just take them forever. But no, I totally get that. It's a different animal altogether. But you know, I was afraid to go into long fiction because I was worried that I couldn't write good dialogue. I had stuck with short stories that were all about things that happen, horror stuff because you didn't have to have a lot of dialogue. And it was through writing the scripts for my three movies that forced me to realize, oh, I told a story. It's nothing but dialogue. I don't have any like action scenes. It's just people talking because that's what they are. They're comedies. I'm like, oh, I can do this. And that's from then on. I mean, I still want to shoot more movies, but it is everything you said about writing. It's just so much, you're in control. It's so much easier to tell your story. um, in a novel form. And so actually what I started doing was I'm taking my scripts and I'm novelizing them. I figured I've got the dialogue already written. Now I can
Yeah,
just now I can just put in a little commentary and some prose here and there between, simple things.
yeah,
So no,
absolutely.
I totally get it.
And we
Um,
have very interesting foils, you know that? Because I'm as a script writer, I'm actually very dialogue driven, whereas you're not. And writing, putting a script into a book actually taught me how to knock back the dialogue. You know.
mhm. Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it. It's just so uncanny because we neither of us really knew this about one another, but going
Yeah.
into this, no, I love that. That's great. Um, do you do any research for your books? And if so, what kinds?
Um, the most interesting research that I do is for the violence. And the reason, and what I'm saying is like any of the gore or any violence that happens between the creatures and the people, or people and the people, I do very interesting research for because my partner is a nurse. So I get to tap her when I'm like, hey, this is what I'm writing. This is what's supposed to happen. Um, how accurate how accurate can I write this? Because there's so much in horror that is obviously hyper reality, as you would in any movie or work of fiction has this hyper reality element to it. Um, but I want this to be accurate. I want the things that you usually see in horror that are so cartoonish to be as accurate as possible because to be I want that to hit you. If there's violence happening in my stories, it's because I want it to hit you. It is not arbitrary. It's not useless for it to be there. It's there for a reason. So if it's gonna grab you and it's going to get you, I want that to be accurate to reality. Um, Especially if I'm trying to, with my settings, be immersive. If that can take it a little bit over the edge, a little bit further with the immersion, then it's going to be that more effective. Um, so you're not going to see a lot of crazy blood spatter or squelching of organs and stuff. Because every time I watch a movie with her, and like there's all that squelching when you're dealing with organs or going inside. She's always like, it doesn't make that sound.
Yeah, when you watch like a Lucio Fulci film.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. She's always like, that doesn't make that sound. And it always makes that sound in movies. And I'm just like, cool, I can use that, you
right.
know. And if she says like, this is the way a bone snaps, or this is the way, this would react, if, this is, or like this is the way that a bullet would exit a body, is like I can now write that to the fullest of accuracy.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I think I that can give me an edge, you know, in my stories is that when you read my stories, they're real. Like it's real. Like that's how it happens.
Anatomically correct.
Yes.
Right. Nice. What is your favorite time of day to write?
In the morning, um, I want to wake up and write because that's when I'm the most alert. That is when my brain is the most active. Once it becomes nighttime, I'm tired. I'm tired. I have two kids, you know. Yeah, all the work, most of the hardest part of the day when you have kids, at least with my kids, is like dinner and bath time and getting them to bed and all of that. Like that's once you're done with it, you're exhausted, man. Add playing with them throughout the day on top of that. It's like all I want to do is sleep. So I can't write. I always tell myself, oh no, once the kids go to bed and you eat your dinner and all that, you can take some time to sit at the desk and like maybe write a paragraph or two, and then you can go to bed. And I'm every single time I'm just like, no, I want to pass out. I just want to pass out. especially because I mean I have a day job too. So when I come home from work, I want I I work a night shift anyway. I get home at like 1 in the morning. All I want to do is sleep. So in the morning, before I exert all of my energy, that's the best time for me to write. So get some of that out before you blow off all your steam throughout the day.
Yeah, I get it. Do you listen to music while writing or any other kinds of distractions, or do you need it to be completely quiet?
So I had this conversation the other day with one of my coworkers. He asked me this question, and it was the first time I ever had to describe what I listen to. And because whenever he works on he's an artist, and he whenever he works on something, he has to have a specific type of music playing and all that. And I was thinking, I was like, well, something that I do. There's an app that I downloaded for. It's supposed to be for sleep sounds, but you can customize the sounds that are in that one loop, and I make the loops a soundtrack to a scene in the story that I'm writing. So while I'm writing this story, I am essentially listening to the soundtrack that would be playing if this story was a movie, I guess. And that keeps me inside the story while I'm writing. Uh, and if I know the scene that this music or sounds are supposed to be playing to, I also have a constant loop of my goal just going in my head. It's like, this is where you're getting. You're going to the point where this is playing. So get there. This is your finish line. Uh, so I don't really listen to music per se, but I listen to whatever can be the soundtrack to what I am writing, because I like to stay inside of my story.
Yeah, gotcha. How often do you write?
Anytime I can. I mean, it varies. There are some times where I spend a whole week or two without writing a word. Um, and then there are some times where I am constantly writing, whether it be time at the desk, or I'm at work on my phone, adding to the story, or even if it's just writing ideas for other stories. There are some times where I am just nonstop at it, and then other times where it's just nothing. It's very spotty for me. So uh, I wish it was more consistent, but unfortunately, it's not the way my brain works. My if I force myself to write during the times that I am not, um, it will be garbage every single time. It is just straight garbage, and I and I just end up deleting it and having to start over once I'm motivated again.
Yeah, I understand. I get that. I mean, I understand Stephen King writes every day, and he's a machine.
Right.
Not everyone is like that. I mean, as much as I'd like to, I fantasize about being like a pulp writer who would write, 5, 10,000 words a day. Like the guy who wrote the Shadow, you know, cranked out a novel every month for like 20 years. Um, you know, there's a part of me that wants that, you know, but knows that it's just not me. It's just not feasible, but I got, you know,
That's a superpower. But if I were to do that, if I were to even try to do that, nothing that I put out. I mean, I might put out a good story maybe every other book, or not even a book,
right.
but like maybe
Yeah.
2 or 3 books. But like I would have more, I would have more stinkers than success stories. It's I want to be able to everything that I put out. I want it to be enjoyable. And to at least some of the people that read it. Um, I don't want to put out something for the sakes of putting it out. You know,
Yeah. I get it.
it's a quality over quantity kind of thing for me.
Right. So tell me how you felt when you saw your book in print Well, you have a book or collection of short stories that was printed?
I have a novella.
Novella. Tell me how you felt seeing your novella in print for the first time.
It was very surreal. Um, it's the first thing I've ever published. So, oh, excuse me. Whoa. Um, First thing I ever published. It was. I teared up a little bit because I've been writing my whole life, and never thought about anything that I've written being seen by anybody but me, but myself, or like anybody that I've given a screenplay or something to, just to read it. But when this came out, the possibility that there are going to be people I've never met who might come across this and read it uh, was a highly emotional moment for me, and it is a self-published book, and even going through that process, I was just kind of like, I, I've done, I've done this. I've done quite a bit here, um, and I couldn't wrap my head around it for a few days. I announced that I released it. It came out of nowhere. It was like no warning to anybody that, hey, here's a thing that I'm doing. It was just, the book is out. Guess what I did, everybody? You know, and getting that, then some of the praise came. Some of the reviews came. Every now and then I got a review, and I was just like, oh my god, people are actually reading this. People are actually enjoying this, and then some of the reviews were comparing me to other writers that I look up to. And like my favorite thing in the world, my favorite show in the world is the Twilight Zone. I can watch that every day for the rest of my life and be happy. So one of the first reviews that came from that book compared it to a Twilight Zone episode, and I was just like, that's it, man. you
Yeah, it's
know,
high praise. I mean,
yeah,
Rod Serling an amazing writer, but he also brought in some of the best science fiction,
yeah,
fantasy, horror writers of all time who contributed to those scripts. I mean, yes, it's a reason why this show's been around for 60 years, and still plays. So, yeah, these shows they're timeless, really. You know. Oh,
yeah.
nice. Yeah.
So to be compared to him, and to be compared to Lovecraft, somebody had said it was, kind of a Lovecraftian tale, and I was just like, did you read what I read? Because it was one of those
Yeah.
where it was like, holy shit,
Yeah. Those are big names.
yeah, like that's those are some words right there. You sure you want to read that one more time? But yeah,
Nice.
I loved it. It was great. It's such a surreal feeling to know that your words are out there for people across the planet. You know,
Yeah, and
or
that they read them.
Earth
Yes.
who have read
Every
this.
every time I get a sale, I'm like, or someone puts a new review on Amazon, I'm like, wow, okay, you paid money for this and you read it and you put a review up. Wow, and you liked it. Okay. Or even when they don't, I'm okay with that too. Just the fact that they read it.
Yeah, but people are not only paying money, but not only spending money, but spending time
Yes.
on your work.
Right.
Consume something you created, and that is one of the greatest feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Oh. Have you ever read your own work a year or more after you published it? And if
Yes,
so, what was that experience like?
yes, I have, and I didn't hate it, but I also knew I can also tell where I've grown from there. And because I read The Town Beyond the Trees a little over a year before or after it came out, and then I kind of went over some of the short stories that I'm writing for this collection that is in progress right now, and I'm just like, okay, like I've grown. I can tell. I've gotten better, and that's good. Like this story is always going to be here. It's always going to be what it is, and I'm happy about it. But it's not the skill that I have now. It's not, I'm not as practiced as I am now. But I love seeing that evolution. And that's like with any writer. You can, if you go from somebody's early works to the works that they have now, you can see, for the most part, a difference. You can see an evolution, and to see that, I think it was reassuring to me because I can tell that I'm growing and I'm getting better and I'm not stagnating. That's one of my biggest fears is stagnating.
Yeah. That, I think it's relatable. I think a lot of us who are creative worry about that time, when things just, we might have had something at once and it's just not flowing anymore. So I've just got a few more questions for you, Ivan. Yeah, this has been a quick hour and a half. We've been flying through this thing. So,
No,
uh,
it passed by so quickly.
yeah. What is your writer fantasy?
My writer fantasy. Wow, you have some really good questions. You know
Thanks. I
that?
appreciate that. I try to, I mean, there are things that I think everyone wants to hear, like writers talking about writing. There are things we don't talk about, creative process, but um, I try to come up with questions that are a little different than people have had. I do the same thing with heavy metal horror when we interview rock stars. I try to come up with the questions they've never have been asked before, because I want them to remember that it was my show, our show, that they got asked this question. And just you want to find out things and make the show entertaining for them too. So I like the open-ended hypotheticals because then it's so much allows someone to express themselves and let everyone else know who they are.
God, it's fantastic. I love it. But my fantasy, I mean, I kind of think of a specific scenario quite often where I'm doing this full time. This is my job, um, and I think about writing in in a home office with a window that over that has this view of a pine forest, whether it be in the distance or like shortly after my property line ends or whatever, you know. But there's this pine forest that I can look into for inspiration because I love pine trees, um, and I'm writing the next, the next chapter or the next story within my Meadow County universe, and my kids are home, and I don't have to worry about where my kids are going to be when I'm at work because my kids are right here when I'm at work, and I don't have to worry about daycares and and all that. But because my kids are small right now, so but my time is more free for my family, and I get to be home and be more present for my family because I get to work on this passion of mine that allows me to be there, and I think that's like my biggest fantasy, and lots of coffee, lots and lots of coffee.
I like the notion of the view because I always picture in my dream, my perfect writing space. It's kind of like almost like the top of a lighthouse, just overlooking Lake Erie or something, or a large lake, a body of water, an ocean, something with movement, not a pond that's static. I like the movement. I like watching it. I like being able to see. I'm in Ohio and I live close to Lake Erie, and on good days you can see, you can see Cleveland, or you can see Toledo. You could, well, no, not that far. Cedar Point, which is a big amusement park.
Yeah,
Um, and knowing just Canada's not too far across the border. It's just there's just something about the big bodies of water that pulls me, yet terrify me at the same time. So no, I get that. Okay, what advice would you give anyone who wants to write?
So I will give a piece of advice that I have given on a podcast before, on an appearance before, because I really really believe in this, and that is uh, the phrase "write what you know." Throw it out. You write whatever you want. Write what you're passionate about. Write what you want to know, because this little thing right here, this little thing right here, is will give you everything that you might want to know. You can research anything. You have a supercomputer in your pocket. So write what you know. Anybody who tells you to, anyone who tells you to do that, don't stay in your lane, man. Um, take the back roads, take the dirt roads when you're writing. Go exploring. Uh, if there's something that you need to know, you have the resources at your disposal to be able to make those ideas and those concepts as accurate as possible. Um, and that's like especially for people who write like fantasy and all of that. You're building your own worlds. You are building everything from scratch. Your rules are yours. There are no rules to what you're building. This is fiction. You know, you can do pretty much anything you want. So write what you want. Write what you love. The rest will come later.
That's excellent. Excellent piece of advice. Really. I love that. Two more. Tell us about your current work in progress.
So, the Meadow County Chronicles, Volume 1, because I already have concepts for Volume 2, um, is a collection of short stories that take place in Meadow County, a fictional county in Florida. And we get to see a few stories that happen around that county. Um, Lots of dark stuff happens in this county. We have some monsters. We have some ghosts. Some forces from other worlds that that come to this county and affect the residents that live within it. So we get to see a few of these residents and what they have gone through uh, living in this county. Um, the characters have not met each other yet, but this is the start of a much bigger world, a much bigger universe that will be fleshed out in more works. So this is more of an introductory piece to the Meadow County universe. I mean, the town beyond the trees did not take place wholly in Meadow County. They did go out of Meadow County for most of the book, but that was kind of an introductory piece character wise. Um, we may see some of those characters later, um, but an introduction to the county itself comes with this collection.
Nice. And lastly, Ivan, where can we find your stories, your books? Where can we find your works?
So, excuse me. So, you can visit my website, ivanlopezwriting.com, and there are links there to Amazon and to Barnes and Noble. So on Amazon, there is a print version and an ebook version, and on Barnes and Noble for now, there's a Nook version. I'm working on getting a print version available for at Barnes and Noble as well. That's coming soon. Um, and there you can also find everything else that I've written. So my Uh, my film reviews are all there, and it's a column called Gallivant of the Grotesque, and you know, credit one of my really good friends, Claudia, for giving me that name. I really loved it. But that's all there. Anything that's related to my writing um, is found on that site. So one stop shop for everything. But if you want to go on social media and follow me, you can do that as well. Ivan underscore O underscore Lopez is my handle for Instagram, and I am much more active there than anything. So I would probably stick to that for now. But all of the other links to my social media outlets are also on my website.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Ivan, I want to thank you for being on Between the Lines tonight with me. It has been really great to get to talk with you solo and learn so much more about you as a person and also about your writing. We've got quite a few similarities in some areas. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, this has been great. I'm so glad I get to know you as well. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, we got to do a movie watch together, like a virtual horror movie watch. We'll get together. We'll just talk horror films because that's something. I mean, we could talk horror films for another hour, easily. Um, yeah, well, that'd be awesome. Um, so excellent. Well, I'm gonna do my commercial, and then we're gonna get out of here. You've been watching and listening to Between the Lines. You can find us at unsaneradio.com. Listen to full episodes or download to your device. You can watch us on our YouTube page, Between the Lines Podcast. If you're watching, that's where you're at. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can also find us on the Otel Talk channel on Roku. If you know someone who would like our show, tell them about us. And if you're a writer who would like to come on the show and join me for a chat, email me at betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. That's betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. And Ivan, here's my cheesy outro. See you next time, Between the Lines.